You better bring it every time. Get the value out of your Tucker. Right, okay. So, going to Tucker, what does Marx think about the idea that the division of labor gives rise to universal opulence? Yes, Jane?
English prosperity isn't alleviating the poverty of the working class.
Very good. English prosperity is not alleviating the poverty of the working class. Now, that's a very strange expression. English prosperity. What does it mean then? English prosperity is not alleviating the poverty of the working class.
That the trickle-down theory is not.
So that English prosperity means prosperity of whom? Well, of some rich people, some group, right? Very good. Have you got a passage for me? 516. Very good. Where on 516? Everybody on page 516. Where on 516? Jane. Come on. I know it's Thursday, but we got to, yes. Naprit. Yes. 2. 16 lines down. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 I've got. Okay, I want to start just a little bit before that. 7 and 4pence in 1852. That's about 14 everywhere. Everywhere? Everybody got everywhere? Yeah. Sienna, we've not heard from you today. Everywhere.
Everywhere is a great mass of the working class is sinking down to lower debt. At the same rate, at least, the note above them are rising in social scales. In all countries in Europe, it's now demonstrable to every unconscious mind, and only denied by those interested in defending other people to the paradigm. That no improvement of machinery, no appliance of science and production, no contrivances of communication, no new colonies, no immigration, no opening of markets, no free trade, no all these things together will do away with the miseries of the industrial status. But that on the present of all things, that every fresh development of the productive powers of labor fades. Yet, a labor must tend to equal social contrast and point social antagonism.
Thank you very much. Very good. That no improvement of machinery, no appliance of science to production, no contrivances of communication, no new colonies, no emigration, no development of division of labor, no opening of markets, no free trade, nor all these things put together will do away with the miseries of the industrial masses. That is to say, no free trade, no development of division that will get rid of poverty. There will not be universal opulence. It is a diametrically opposed hypothesis, claim, diametrically opposed to that of Adam Smith. And if you look earlier, this whole passage, this whole address to the Working Man's International Association, which was the first attempt to have a international working class solidarity, working class workers in different parts of the world, in different countries, building an association together. These were largely, of course, European workers building contacts. So Marx was addressing this international, Marx was addressing this congregation of workers from different parts of Europe, and he was telling them that Smith was wrong. He was telling them that no advance of new machinery, free trade, advances in the division of labor would actually, of themselves, eliminate the poverty of the laboring poor. And that is how he begins. Working men, he says on page 512, it is a great fact that the misery of the working masses has not diminished from 1848 to 1864, and yet this period is one of unrivaled development of its industry and the growth of commerce. So commerce develops, markets develop, but the working class condition has not improved. This is, Marx says, a fact. And if you actually look at the text, who does he quote? What is the sources for these facts? What are the sources for these facts? Yes. Government documents. Excellent. So he's referring to the so-called blue books, which were written up by inspectors of factories. He quotes government documents to support his case. This is not him fabricating data. This is the government's own data that is making claims that somehow commerce will lead to the opulence of all. But in fact, if you read those documents, you find the opposite. Yes, indeed. Very good. Very good. So what you get instead of universal opulence, you get what? Polarization. As Jane says, you get polarization of wealth becoming more wealthy and poor becoming poorer. And what we're going to have to figure out over the next 3 or 4 weeks, why this might be the case. We only have it as an empirical claim so far. Why was it the case? Alright, so that's the first point. And you should look at the entire address. And the point of the entire address is to say that with the development of commerce, with the development of market exchange, with the development of factories, actually you do not get universal opulence, you get polarization of the rich on the one side and the poor on the other. But there is more to Marx than this, of course. And this is my second point, potentiality and reality. And here I want to refer to the Chartist, the address he gives to the People's Paper, which is on page, what's the page? 577, something like that. 577. Speech at the anniversary of the People's Paper. What is he saying here? Well, look, what does Smith say? Smith says, the division of labor is essentially something good, in which we have increased productivity and opulence, and people develop new talents. Yes, there is some degradation, there is some stupefaction, but that can be righted. That's no problem. That can be righted with a bit of education, public education. Essentially, the development of the division of labor is progressive because people are naturally born to engage in exchange. The development of exchange of markets allows them to realize their potential as truck barters and exchangers. And so essentially, history is the simple progress in which individuals are able to realize their abilities. Potentiality and reality converge. Our potentiality as human beings to develop our talents in the division of labor coincides with reality. Potentiality coincides with reality. That is Smith. But what does Marx say? Marx says the opposite, and this is quite a long passage, but I must read it to you nevertheless. 577, 2, 4, 6 lines from the bottom. 6 lines from the bottom on page 577. A wonderful passage. He says there, on the one hand, there have started into life industrial and scientific forces, new machinery, which no epoch of the former human history had ever suspected. These new machinery, until this happens today. Who would imagine the electronic age even 30 years ago? Who would imagine an iPhone? Yeah. And what would we do without our iPhone now, Conrad? Yes, right. On the one hand, there have started out into life industrial and scientific forces which no epoch of the former human history had ever suspected. On the other hand, there exist symptoms of decay, far surpassing the horrors recorded of the latter times of the Roman Empire. In our days, everything seems pregnant with its contrary. Machinery, gifted with the wonderful power of shortening and fructifying human labor, we behold starving and overworking it. Indeed, we live in a world in which United States, people are working harder and longer hours on the one side, and more people are finding themselves without jobs. So, overwork and unemployment, alongside the iPhone, alongside this amazing new technologies. That is what Marx is drawing our attention to as we make all these advances. Yet, unlike Smith, he says, it goes along with continued poverty. The newfangled sources of wealth, by some strange weird spell, are turned into sources of want. The victories of art seem bought by the loss of character. We have wonderful art, says Marx, but at the same time we ourselves become banal. We lose our character. We lose our capacity, most of us, to even appreciate art. At the same pace that mankind masters nature, man seems to become enslaved to other men or to his own infamy. We become increasingly subordinate to others, as indeed the economy develops. Even the pure light of science seems unable to shine, but on the background of ignorance. Just think of the ignorance that exists in this society alongside the enormous advances in science. All our invention and progress seem to result in endowing material forces with intellectual life and in stultifying human life into a material force. As human life becomes a material force, that our very existence becomes something that we don't control anymore, Marx is saying. At the same time, intellectual forces become a power over us. The machinery, the intellect that goes into the machine, becomes a power over us, governs our life. This antagonism between modern industry and science on the one hand, modern misery and dissolution on the other hand. This antagonism between the productive powers and the social relations of our epoch is a fact, palpable, overwhelming, and not to be controverted. Some parties may wail over it, others may wish to get rid of modern arts in order to get rid of modern conflicts. Or they may imagine that so signal progress in industry wants to be completed by a signal regress in politics. On our part, we do not mistake the shape of the shrewd spirit that continues to mark all these contradictions. We know that to work well, the newfangled forces of society, they only want to be mastered by newfangled men, and such are the working men. They are as much the invention of modern time as machinery itself. What is he saying here? Matthew?
Well, he's contradicting Smith's progression history, saying that the division of labor progresses linearly. He's saying that the creation of wage labor is as much a creation, it's something that's new, and it's something that's come out, it's not anything natural.
Right, yes. Yes, but what does he mean? We know that to work well, the newfangled forces of society, they only want to be mastered by newfangled men, and such are the working men. What does he mean here? See, these newfangled forces in society are at this point, for Marx, and people might say today, these newfangled forces become not a vehicle through which we are able to realize our potentiality as human beings, but they subordinate us, subjugate us into these factories, turn us into wage laborers, overworkers, expel us from production. They are a power over us, these newfangled forces. They are a power over us. They can only truly liberate us if, what? Let me read it to you again. We know that to work well, for us to be free, to work well, the newfangled forces of society, they only want to be mastered by newfangled men, and such are the working men. Siana.
He's saying that working class needs to kind of bring in this new technology and use it for the good of the people. Who's in charge of it, not use it for the good of the people?
B. Yes, beautifully put. That in fact, these newfangled forces, these new technologies, so far are used to imprison, subordinate, and subjugate the working class. Only when the working class seizes control over those forces of production, those newfangled machinery, instruments, technology, only when the working class seizes hold of them and reorganizes society, can those newfangled forces be the source of people's emancipation, people being able to realize their true potentiality. Contained in that sentence is the entire theory of Marx and Engels, namely that capitalism, the modern world, develops this incredibly powerful technology, but only under capitalism, people are subjugated only by the transformation of capitalism into a new society called communism. Can those forces truly liberate individuals? That will be a society in which we control the forces of production, we control new technologies, rather than are controlled by them. And that will depend upon overthrowing those who what? Control the forces of production at the moment, namely what Marx and Engels will call the bourgeoisie. So that sentence there contains, very good, Siana, that sentence there contains the essence of Marx and Engels' theory. And I have 30 seconds left. But because I'm a generous person, I'm going to let you go, but not before I tell you what you're going to do over the weekend. You are going to read, you should look over those passages again, and they will now should make more sense to you. What I gave you you should have already read them twice, but also what I want you is now to study the German ideology, because we have been talking about Marx and Engels' relationship to Smith today. Next time it's going to be the relationship to Hegel and the Hegelians. Read, enjoy yourselves.